Hey Collective, it's Al and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be dedicated towards testing. And the reason I wanted to talk about it is because I had to go through the process again. Because, I've had that thing up my nose more than I've had dick in my body. Well, there was at one time that we were like snorting everything, but that's a whole different topic. One time it went up my nose. That was it. No, but the ridiculousness behind it. So I'm going to make it very comical about the situation because I found it very, very revealing. And so essentially what it was that, as we all go through this process of awakening, and kind of all of us are starting to look around and going, this does not make any sense, but okay, we got to play along. Everybody plays their part in this grand musical that we are in. And so as I was enduring the situation, I decided that I would go through a public service type of thing, because I had never really gone through that. All of the times I've gone through this process, I've gone through a private venture, or through the private sector. And so this time I decided to try the free services area. And so I went and I started to register, and let me just put it this way. It was kind of so invasive that I felt like I was getting a pap smear when I should have just been getting a root canal. Like, I was like, why are you in like all of my business like this? And I realized it was information gathering, right? Like, there was a lot of information that was being gathered under the idea that they're monitoring where the outbreaks are and so forth. And so I was like, well, that's very nice. It's reminding me of the Patriot Act, where they can go and do things under one guise, but are actually collecting data on another direction, right? And so I was very aware of that. And so I realized I'm just going to go back to the private sector. And so I went and I did the private sector thing. Now, the interesting part is the reason I made the difference between the two, in my personal opinion, and this is not a medical advice at all. This is just my personal thinking. I'm a layman. So I looked at it like this. Through a public service vehicle, it becomes public service information. It becomes shareable within the governmental agencies. Whereas with a private venture or a private sector scenario, they would have to get a court order information in order to pull the data back, right? And so that's where my thinking was. And so what's funny is I've tested, I've been negative. Obviously, I'm negative to it. And so the interesting part is that I've been directly exposed to it. I never got it, but we're not going to get into that. What I wanted to get into was the fact that when I was speaking to the person through the private sector, when I finally went to go get it done, because we have to, if you live in any type of situation where you have roommates, the people that own that property can make you go get tested regularly. So we're used to it, right? And so as I'm finishing up the thing where, it's like all the way up my nose, and I was like, dear God, I've had those swabs in me more than I've had dick over the course of my entire fucking life, with those things being so invasive. It's like a proctology exam through your nose. And so I was trying not to giggle at how ridiculous my thought process was. But the reason I'm bringing it to you all is because of the conversation that I had after I went to blow my nose. So I went to blow my nose because it's a very icky situation. And as I did, I realized something. Under something as loopy as the Patriot Act, one of the things that they were able to do was to go in and get information that is not part of the process. That is actually information that they gathered because of terrorists and so forth. And so since, I'm not going to go all that route because I have nothing to do with that sector. But what I'm pointing out was that I was realizing that those swabs reveal more than we know. It reveals DNA strains, it reveals a lot of other things, but one of the things I found interesting is I had been making a comment about how minorities in particular seem to be under assault, to get the V word, right? And I was finding it very interesting that also one of the things you can get off a swab like that is you can test for if someone is taking narcotics or any type of other substances that go up the nose specifically. And I thought, well, interesting. Under the other thing, under the Patriot Act, wouldn't that be something that they could gather from that and not tell the people and have that almost as leverage in case anything ever goes down? And though I'm not a conspiracy theorist necessarily, I did find that very oh shit. Well, personally, I don't do any drugs anymore, so for me it wasn't a big deal, but it was something that came across because of the fact that they have done some unethical things in the past. And so as I'm sitting there having this mental ping pong tournament that was going on in my head within, trying not to be like an alarmist, but trying to be of the people, for the people, with the people, I realized that it was really, really a great way to get information on, especially minorities, right? Because it's something that can be used. It's something that they can go after. Like, let's say that someone has tested positive on a drug that's in their system when they go to get this particular thing. Well, that would be very helpful in a situation of a court case where they would be able to track that. Anyway, you know what I mean? Like, it was very, very dark, but we're living in some dark times, y'all. And so as I was thinking about it, I decided that I would make an honest question to the people that were working in this facility. And the interesting part was that most of them that were present, and I'm not saying this for a sweeping generalization, but I'm saying for where I was, did not get there. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, at least I'm not crazy. And they're like, and the reasoning was very simple. It is not 100%. And they're not, some of them even within the staff, didn't understand why people were putting active agents into their own body when they knew that it wasn't foolproof, and more to the point, that they can still get it afterwards. And so I was very happy to hear that from that environment. Now, notice I'm not using the words because of the fact that we get censored in our country, in America, if we say anything that mentions it. And that's another red flag. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because I asked a very honest question, and I thought that you guys would be interested in the answer, and it was, if you get this, then doesn't that mean that you have the active agent in you? Which is a logical question. I said, but doesn't that mean that you can also develop it? And they said, well, it's a deterrent, but technically you can develop it. And I'm like, well, what about the rest of us who don't want to get this? If we're in the same house in that situation, then doesn't that mean that we become susceptible if that person does? Whereas if we wouldn't have gotten this, it wouldn't have been an issue. And so the interesting question was, or the result was, where they said, well, it's up to every individual to decide for themselves. And so what I thought was very interesting and shareable with you all is the fact that something isn't adding up in this equation. So instead of being alarmist about it, I just thought I'd bring it to you from an actual person who's gone through the process. And many of you are having these experiences, but we're so afraid to talk about it because we are so censored right now, and we do seem to become vilified if we even make logical questions, that I just decided that I would do something for us as a leader, and that is to just pose these things in actual conversations. No one should be able to red flag this, because I have not said anything that is not something that I was speaking to a medical provider, not the news media, not some sort of like little meme that pops up or some asshole who's telling me what I should or shouldn't do. I was talking to my own medical practitioners. And so I want to be very clear on that. There's no reason that this should be flagged because the information came from medical staff. But what's interesting is the fact that there was also a question that I didn't want to get into, which was about the things that we're hearing about the ramifications with the menstrual cycles and what's going on with reproductive stuff down the road. And I didn't get an opportunity to go into it. But the reason I even wanted to mention this is because no matter who you are, one of the things that we are encountering, if you listen to the media, is that 54%, they say, of the population, and at least in America, has taken the V word. And I'm like, well, that's pretty good, because 21.9% of the population are considered baby boomers. And baby boomers are on their way. No offense, but they're getting older. And so they would be most susceptible. So then what they're doing is getting to, I'd say about the goal would be 60% before the country starts to reopen. And the reason I say that is because that means that the population control measure that's in play, that's all I'm going to say, is actually allowing them to actually reach a bigger demographic. And so I just wanted to point this all out to you all, because it's something that means that there's more going on than meets the eye. And we, as the American people and people in the world, need to be conscious of the fact that there are things that are not adding up. And instead of just laying there and taking it, we need to ask the questions from the people who actually have the right answers. Not people who are endorsed by pharmaceutical companies, not people, but the people who actually work the front lines. And the interesting part about the entire experience is I realized how much information they have gathered on every one of us through this fear tactic type mentality. And I just wanted to share it with you all as something just to consider as you go throughout your day. Remember, the worst thing you can do in this world is ask a question, because when you get the answer, you cannot unknow what you know. That's it for me, guys. Have a great day. Bye.